Welcome, everyone. Hello, my name is Kim Marie, and thank you very much for inviting me back to speak to you today. We have a big subject to cover, and I am a PowerPoint slideshow queen. So, a couple of technical things. I'm blessed with a husband who helps me on that technical side, and so I'm recording this on my end. We're going to edit it. We're going to put it up privately on our YouTube page, and you will all have access to this recording afterwards. We hope to get it up for you either Monday or Tuesday, right after we're done with all of this. Also, all of the PowerPoint slides that I'm going to show you today, you are going to get a copy of that. You'll be able to access it online, and I will also email the PDFs to Veronica for all of you to share. So I just want you to not feel like you have to take notes furiously. Unless you got a lot of Virgo in your chart, you can. But just, again, know that you will get all of these PowerPoint slides for your own reference as we go forward. I always welcome questions. You can interrupt me at any time if I say something you don't understand. If there's something you want me to explore more, or if there is a subject I'm not covering. There's a lot of material, and rather than cover the subject of AI, artificial intelligence, in all 4 PowerPoint slideshows, I will emphasize certain subjects on each different planet, even though they carry across to all of them. And in my world, I now consider Chiron to be a dwarf planet like Pluto with the astronomers. So I've been including it as a kind of regular planet for a while now. And so let's get started. Any thing that I need to address, you are welcome to interrupt me at any time, Veronica, okay? Let's see if my PowerPoint's working. Okay, hold on just a second while I click here and get ourselves going. Here's your dates, everybody, of their ingresses into new signs, and rarely do we have the 4 outer planets ingress change signs within a 3-4 year window. This is not something that happens a lot, and just this alone is going to tell you, fasten your seat belts. We're gonna have a wild ride this decade. And so there will also be certain slides that I'm going to repeat at the beginning of each segment so that they are included in the recording and included in the PDFs for you. In addition to these planets changing signs, they are also going to be making some aspects to each other. You can see we've got some beautiful trines and sextiles for the most part, and then we've got a little bit of little more tension aspects to Chiron with Neptune and Pluto. And so again, you'll have all of this to write down however you want. A couple of things from the perspective of evolutionary astrology. I have been studying with the Jeffrey Wolf Green method for almost 40 years now. And so my filter of EA is through Jeffrey Wolf Green's method. We look at 2 types of astrological timing or evolution, involution: non-cataclysmic, which is how we live day by day. And then, of course, every so often we have some pretty intense cataclysmic changes in our life. They both operate in everybody's life, and astrology is one of those tools that can hopefully help us sense what is coming to perhaps lessen some of the cataclysms. Now, both types of evolution will represent evolutionary forces overcoming resisting forces. And if we have that cataclysmic change, it is because the universe is not wanting us to retreat backwards. It is wanting us to actually evolve. Also, from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, the planet the sign and house rules represent one archetype. You can see on your screen from our perspective, Moon, Cancer, Fourth, for example, is one archetype. Jeffrey Green would always say, if you just learn the 12 archetypes, then you can extrapolate them into a planet, a sign, a house that can lessen confusion when you want to do that art and magic of synthesizing everything together into a chart of a human soul, for instance. So just two little tidbits for you. And so let's jump into Pluto in Aquarius. It's going to spend the next 2 decades there, and it's going to have 2 retrograde cycles back into Capricorn. We've been in the midst of one of them right now. We are all going to feel that intensifying clash between regressing forces wanting to maintain status quo and evolving forces wishing to advance all kinds of agendas, especially social agendas with Aquarius. Everybody, individually and collectively, could experience cataclysms as we are trying to reorientate ourselves and how we are going to go forward, because Pluto in general, death and rebirth, blows things up. So we have to evolve. Aquarius is almost the same way with its rulership of Uranus. We'll look at that in a little bit of detail in the next few slides. But Pluto's transit through this slide, even looking back to the last time, you can see can bring major changes to us and the world. Here are your specific dates for when Pluto goes into Aquarius, retreat Capricorn, etc., etc. Again, you'll have all this information for you afterwards that you can save, print out, do whatever you would like to do with it. Couple of things, though, about Pluto. First of all, it's 248 years around the zodiac, is very eccentric. It goes from 10 years in Scorpio to 32 years in Taurus. And so to me, that almost represents our soul's evolution. You know, when it's in its own sign of Scorpio, it's so super intense. It doesn't take a very long transit. That polarity Taurus may be trying to get us a little more objective and to learn a few things. It slows down. So we're in process of Pluto's transit starting to slow down. You can see on your screen here from Capricorn to Aquarius, it lengthens its transit by 4 years. Now, wherever Pluto is transiting by sign and house in your own individual chart, it's going to represent the current environment through which you are evolving your natal Pluto archetype. I'll go through just a tidbit of that for us. Wherever Pluto is in your natal chart by sign, that's the generation you were born into, your generational lessons. By house, that's your own individual soul lessons. The same thing is true when it's doing its transits. Now, what is the soul? An immutable consciousness that exists from life to life. And different souls exist at different levels of conscious awareness that we call evolutionary states of consciousness in EA. All souls have a dual desire nature. We have a desire to separate from that which created us. I exist. I am me. I sense myself. And those separating desires are anything and everything. I desire to have a relationship, a home, a job, you know, whatever it is that you desire individually. And generationally, we have collective separating desires. But we also have a desire to return to that which created us. Why am I here? What is this all about? And so we go through countless lifetimes, exhausting our separating desires and expanding our soul and consciousness through each and every experience / lifetime. And eventually, that desire to know source is the last desire left. By the way, the last separating desire to be exhausted Is the sexual desire due to the procreation of our species, just our ability to survive? EA has a guess that maybe 1 to 2% of souls on the planet have exhausted all desires except the sexual one, and they're on their way of exhausting that one. And that can sometimes be why some of those gurus have their sexual scandals that come along if they're trying to do it from the head up instead of moving through lifetime, naturally exhausting it. And so here's those evolutionary states of consciousness that I spoke about. And here again, they're not solid. They evolve through long periods of time. But let's just say the ending of the Piscean age, approximately 70% of souls, any planet, any country, any race, their consensus, they consent, they follow the herd, the leader. If they say astrology is the work of the devil, they take it in wholesale without even thinking about it. Approximately 2 out of 10 souls on the planet are learning to individualize. I will learn to think for myself. I will choose my own beliefs. I will figure out what I want to do and think and believe in the world of politics, for instance. And then approximately 1 out of 10 souls are what we would call spirituated. They understand timeless, universal, spiritual principles, kind of like the mysticism side of your organized religions. And one thing that I will point out from EA's perspective, we do not look at these evolutionary states of consciousness as better than, less than. As you can see by the circles on your screen, they're just expanding ripples in the pond of awareness within our soul. You cannot tell the evolutionary state from the chart alone. You must observe and correlate. This is a big phrase in evolutionary astrology. Observe and correlate. What is the context in which any soul is born into? What are the environmental conditionings of their family, their belief systems, their society, their country, etc.? Now, we go through this because in EA, Pluto represents the soul. And as I said before, wherever your natal Pluto is, by sign, house, aspects, we call that your karmic dynamic. It's where you gravitate to for unconscious security reasons. This is the part of me I know from before, from the past. Common example I give for your generation, the Pluto Leo generation is more or less the baby boomers. Your Pluto Virgos are more or less your millennials. It's interesting how they don't match up exact, but they get close enough to astrology there. We also look at that polarity to Pluto as the evolutionary intent of where we are striving to go in any lifetime. So that polarity point by sign, it's the generational lessons. The Pluto Leos, the polarities Aquarius. You came here to go from subjective consciousness Leo to objective consciousness Aquarius. To step outside the immediacy of your world and recognize you don't run the show. There's a larger force at work. How do I align with that? And then, of course, that polarity by your individual Pluto house is where your own soul is striving to go. There's a couple variations. We do not have time to get into those. You're welcome to contact me personally if you want to know more about it. But what I also just want to point out here on the bottom of your screen is that karmic dynamic and evolutionary tint with Pluto's slow transits lets us know that there are collective groups of souls that will come in at various times on the planet for both their karmic reasons. We want to collectively gravitate to or heal perhaps something we experienced as a group, but also we as a group can come through wanting to affect some type of evolution on the planet as well. Now, we're going to jump right in. Pluto in Aquarius. It is our soul's evolution of our individuated unconsciousness. And the intent is to decondition from our past, to liberate ourselves in the present moment so that we can evolve our soul. And again, we're going to do this as individuals through Pluto and Aquarius, and we're going to do this as a collective group in various ways. You'll do it as a Canadian, I'll do it as an American, I'll do it as a human species. And so it represents how each of us go through those famous upsets in life. As we said, both Pluto and Aquarius / Uranus kind of will clear the space when we're clinging to the past too tightly. And so when we have those upsets, do we try to go back to the past? Do we freeze up? That's one of the Aquarius archetypes. My mind just goes blank because I am traumatized or in a state of shock. Or do we accept change and make an effort to move forward? So both of these archetypes represent revolutionary cycles. Pluto is metamorphosis, death and birth, literally and figuratively. And Uranus is transformation, how we move forward step by step, including those big cataclysmic steps when they are necessary. So we have to break free from consensus conditioning and liberate ourselves. And so it may or may not happen depending upon our emotional security patterns and needs. Most of us on an individual and collective level cling to the past for security reasons. All you have to do is look at a collective group, a certain country across the world, and see how they keep repeating the past again. Oh, excuse me, Americans. This is not the time for gun control laws. This is a time for thoughts and prayers. Excuse my sarcasm, a little sensitive to the subject. And so if we are resisting, it will increase the amount of cataclysm that may perhaps come through in a traumatic way. So the archetype of Aquarius, and that includes Uranus and the 11th house, it is the archetype of trauma. And so the broadest intent of Pluto and Aquarius is for traumas of our past, both this life and past lives, to resurface into our consciousness so that we can heal the trauma and the wounding around it. So through Pluto and Aquarius, some traumas are going to be remembered. They're going to pop up into consciousness spontaneously, or past life regression, hypnotherapy. Some traumas will be re-experienced, that deja vu thing. We will also have new trauma that will perhaps come through. Here in the US, we never think that the mass shooting is going to happen in our community. And if you follow any of the major consensus news, those are the comments that somebody makes in the news. Never thought it would happen to me. Now it is. Oh dear, how am I going to relate to this? How is our little community going to relate to this? And so the archetype of trauma, whether in present or past lives, is an intense disturbance that causes a shocking event or stress. And trauma can be spiritual, mental, emotional, or physical, and it tends to have a lasting effect. Now, because we are all reincarnated souls, EA comes from the basis of reincarnation, we all have suppressed traumas that dictate subconscious behavioral reactions. EA thinks that perhaps 85 to 90% of us are born with past life trauma. And so, because Aquarius is an air sign and it rules the mental realm, it rules all of your various mental traumas, personality disorders, sociopathic behaviors, etc., etc. So we will see these coming up in the collective conscious awareness so that we will start to deal with that. By the way, you can finally get healthcare in the US when you turn 65. That's me, yaha. And our Medicare is finally going to start expanding their coverage of mental health for seniors. And so, big issue in our news for Pluto and Aquarius. But again, this stuff coming into consciousness is to make us aware of it, and hopefully we will all decide to go forward in choosing how we are going to work with it collectively, how we are going to heal it in our various collective groups. We have to make persistent efforts to change those effects of trauma, alternative traditional therapies. You're going to see throughout these slides blue hyperlinks. That means when you get the PDF online, you can actually click on that and it will take you to various articles and PDFs you can use. Jeffrey Wolf Green came up with a self-hypnosis exercise that you do with a recording that is absolutely great. So you're going to have the hyperlink and the instructions on how to use it on your screen to help you work with your own effects of trauma. And so, just a little more detail, the past in all its detail, it is going to have an effect upon us in the current life. And if we can address it, it allows us to break free. And we will also have collective traumas come up. Just look at our two countries going through all of the boarding school issues. I live in Western South Dakota, the Black Hills. I'm 30 minutes from Mount Rushmore. But I live in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I am actually about a mile from our Indian boarding school. And we are currently in process of looking for the little souls that are in unmarked graves without disturbing the soil. But we have also broke ground through a federal lawsuit on a memorial and a building to teach all of this history and culture right here in my little community. So quite familiar with it, being from northern plains of the US, and how our community is working to heal with that trauma on a collective level. Unfortunately, consensus societies may not understand the broader pictures. And so we repeat the pattern and repeat the pattern until we get it, as I had said. Also, what will happen with what we call the present moment, how we are living life today. Saturn, old ruler of Aquarius, represents individuated consciousness, and Saturn, whatever it's uncomfortable with, wants to push it down. I want to be secure. I don't want to look at anything that's going to make me uncomfortable. We do this individually, we do this collectively. And so Pluto in Aquarius is going to keep pushing whatever we suppress back up to the surface into consciousness. We do not get to suppress it. And so all you have to do is just pay attention. Oh, I need to, yeah. Oh, let's make it simple. Oh, I really do need to go back to the gym and start exercising again. Oh, no, I don't want to get up off the couch. Simple example. You can extrapolate it in any way you want. And so as you get those little repeated messages with Pluto through Aquarius, where do you need to take that Saturnian effort to address it and change however you need to change? Now, with Blueprints of the Future, here's the beauty of Aquarius. It comes through a spontaneous messaging of a repetitious nature. In other words, we can see it, we can hear it, we can sense it, but it comes through on its own. You're driving in your car or you're doing dishes and poof, you get that future-oriented message. I really do need to go back to school and get my master's degree. Oh, it comes up again and again and again. And so once or twice, fantasy, way down the road. But if it comes again and again, it is your own individuated soul telling you where you are meant to move forward. It is the most natural way. Uranus, Aquarius, 11th house. of helping us to evolve and move into our future. And so if you've never heard of this concept before, just think on it a little while, and you'll start to then, just in that way, become aware of how you need to move forward. And it can help you find that Platonian courage to do so over the need to be secure. All right, hope this is working for everybody. I'm going a little fast on some of these slides, but again, you're going to have this to review as you want. We're going to look at some of the collective stuff coming up. And so, again, all three areas, past, present, and future, will be activated in our own individuated unconsciousness. So we want to understand those major changes on the horizon, and we want to choose to activate. Now, what we typically respond to from the evolutionary impulse is to resist, to go for it, or to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Okay, my thing tells me a hand's being raised, and so question. Yes, Marianne, you can unmute yourself, please.
Hello, Kim Marie. Very nice to be here with you. Unfortunately, I'm sick today, so I have to be watching online. A question that always comes up for me is, what exactly is an individuated unconscious?
And so we all have an individual consciousness. You know yourself, all right? But there's a part of yourself that exists within your mind, within your brain, which is ruled by Uranus, Aquarius, 11th house. There's a part of yourself that carries all the memories of every lifetime of existence you have ever had. And if it was in our consciousness, we'd all go crazy. And so our soul puts it beneath the surface, where it's unconscious or subconscious. And it's there. And as we expand in consciousness through lifetimes, eventually we start to have spontaneous memories of the past. Sometimes we will go through therapeutic practices like past life regression, where we will take ourselves through remembering that, and therapies of healing it. By the way, I'm a big fan of deep memory processing by Roger Wolger. If you want to look that up, deep memory processing, Roger Wolger. It works to make past life trauma conscious and heal it on all 4 levels. And so does that make sense for you, Marianne?
Yes, thank you. Very helpful.
You're welcome. You're most welcome. So again, that urge to evolve, do we resist? Do we go for it? Or do we typically change in some ways, resist in others, and kind of go back and forth and maybe make baby steps forward? So here again, it's deconditioning from any conditioning factors in our life. And so this includes gender, parental, religious, societal, career, economic, all of those. And one more time, most of us have a fear of changing directions. And so there's an interface in Aquarius between the security of old ruler Saturn and individuated consciousness, and the insecurity of Uranus and what we don't know, which includes that individuated unconsciousness. Pluto in Aquarius is going to insist that we evolve and move forward. It takes courage to be a group of one and liberate into our unique individual soul nature, which is Pluto in Aquarius. And so we have 3 categories of groups and individuals with Aquarius. those who are the avant-gardes, the rebels, the progressives, those who really want to go for it and change society in some way. And then we have those who want to defend the past. I like the political structure the way it is with myself in control. And then we have those in the middle who go back and forth and back and forth. And evolution is a continual interface of these three categories. And because consensus consciousness, Jeffrey would say, cowbells around your neck, is the mass, the majority, is why evolution is so slow. And that is why we have a tendency to create those cataclysms in our life. Now, just briefly, that was deep psychology of Pluto and Aquarius, by the way. It also rules our brain, rules the lining of our lungs, the air we breathe. That's going to be an issue coming up. Our central nervous system, it co-rules with Mercury, our nervous system in general. So Aquarius rules all those dendrites where we have memory and we create new information. We're going to work to have to expand our consciousness with Pluto and Aquarius. It rules those synapses. You know that phrase, what fires together, wires together, and how we have to change the firing. We have to change the affirmations to change the results. And so how do we make those deliberate efforts? And in general, Aquarian rebellions follow Capricorn outmoded crystallizations. So get ready for the ride of societal changes. And also Aquarius rules electricity, technology, inventions. We know Aquarius rules groups of friends, and it has a general rulership of astrology as well. And so let's take a little look here at some of the things that are coming up. We will deal with these aspects as we move through. I put this on your screen for you. EA works with the cycle of phases and aspects. I'll first, let me see if I can get this for you. A first quarter square is a crescent side square, and a first quarter square, which is different than a last quarter square, which can be the applying disseminating square or after the last quarter square. So we work with the whole 0 to 360 cycle of phases and aspects. And for those of you who have been with me before, this was my last subject that I spoke about to your group a few years ago. And I was blessed to come across this concept in EA's teachings from the very beginning. So I've had the time to really work with it. And I've watched a lot of your more, I say the word traditional, but I've watched a lot of astrology start to utilize this concept of 0 to 360 in the cycle of phases and aspects. And so we'll get into those aspects when we look at Neptune and Uranus, but there's one big message that I just want you to know from all three of them. I've been saying this for a few years. I really do think that we will have a metaphysical or new age renaissance come along with these three planets in fire and air signs. Fire and air are active polarity, energy moving outward. And these three outer planets having sextiles and trines, which are more or less ease aspects, they can create that energy. I want to know, I want to know, I want to know. And so with the cataclysmic changes that are possible on this planet, we're going to have an increasing need to know Aquarius, to understand deeply Neptune, to make sense of Uranus and Gemini. And so there is that potential for those of us in the metaphysical world, as I broadly call it, to offer peace and balance through the chaos that can come through the rest of this decade and beyond. And especially the younger generations. You perhaps heard that, you know, when COVID shut everything down, you know, and everybody stayed home, you know, and turned to the internet, there was an increase of youth educating themselves, across the world. And one of the areas was wanting to know more about astrology. There's just been a splurge of young astrologers coming on to the planet. And so, in whatever way you can, encourage the younger generations to really carry forth with all of the occult sciences, as we will call them, not limited to just astrology, because they can really help us return to what we would call natural spiritual laws and principles, which are always observable in nature. Don't need a book, don't need a person, don't need a building. All right, so remember this slide right here as we go through the next few slides collectively, okay? First of all, let's just briefly look at the last time that Pluto was in Aquarius. Actually, we're going to look at the last two. I only got one slide, but it was the American and French Revolutionary Wars the last time we had Pluto in Aquarius. Me, American, we actually created a constitution. And then we had our first 10 amendments to it called the Bill of Rights. We had our USA Supreme Court come about and kind of really settled into the two levels of Congress that we would have. And so those were some pretty spectacular changes that came through, at least from our perspective, where I come from in the US, and it's all up for review again. But we discovered Uranus with Pluto in Aquarius, and Ben Franklin invented bifocals. Where would we be without our bifocals? Go back one more. Henry VIII broke free from the Catholic Church and created the Church of England. That was a huge, huge deal, scandal back in that time. And we also had the Protestant Reformations come about. I'm not the best at pronouncing words. Copernicus published his arguments for a heliocentric universe. How dare he? And of course, Nostradamus started publishing his first almanacs. Nostradamus was a ninth house Pluto, if you're not aware of that. So just little tidbits for you. But let's look forward as to what we're coming up with. First of all, here's the chart from your perspective in Ottawa. You have a Taurus rising, but the first time Pluto went into Aquarius, March 23rd of this year, there were 5 planets in Aries. I mean, just that alone from what I've just said, does that tell you bust out, break free, bust out, break free? Look at how AI exploded on the scene the spring into the summer for so many of us. But for you, as with your natal Neptune in the 12th house, how do you get all this Aryan energy out? It just emphasizes that Canadian freedom and your socialist let's get along energy that your country goes back and forth with. For you, it will mean that there are things of your past, 12th house, that you're going to want to deal with in order to go forward. Again, this is ingress chart. We perhaps know as astrologers that Pluto is square the nodes of the moon. It has been through most of the year 23. And so we have that own trauma for ourselves between our emotional past and our emotional future. And I want to be secure. And I got to make big changes. And now it's in Libra Aries and it's me and you. And do we get along or do we fight? And so, that emotional behavior, Pluto is a water element, emotions. There's still going to be some strong energies that want to cling to the past. Aquarius is a fixed modality. But we also had the North Node at the time of the first ingress, conjunct Venus and Uranus, which will say for most of us, no matter where we are in the world, we're going to continue to deal with the wealth inequalities, the resource inequalities that we have on planet Earth. And perhaps something to really recognize is it's going to be very important for us to have an inner security, North Node in Taurus, as we move forward with everything going on the planet. Here's your bi-wheel. I did my research. I hope this is the chart that the majority of you today agree with, which is your 12 a.m. separation from England. Now you can see, if you haven't looked at this yet, all of this Aryan energy on your Neptune, which you've got a return coming. We'll look at that in a little bit. And, you know, you guys may be going through your own, as we said, dealing with the past, moving forward. I don't get all your Canadian news, but I would say that perhaps because this is so much of your past, it may really be coming up as an issue in some way. You don't need me to tell you about your forest fires that come a lot from the US with our greenhouse gases. But you also are looking at, with Pluto going into Aquarius, the fact that you guys are approaching a last quarter square to your natal chart. Last quarter squares are crises in consciousness. And because you're Pluto in Taurus second, you're going to have resource crises. You're a land of material wealth. You're a land of resources. And so you will most likely see things come up around that, not only for your own planet, but because you are further north in a more temperate zone as the world warms. What will you share and what will you not share with the rest of the planet? Now, we could do a deep dive and spend a couple hours on this chart. I'm just giving you pointers, highlighters, things for you to look at on your own. You can see here Uranus is already on that Pluto bringing this up. And you can see Mars in Gemini on your public collective, that duality that exists for you. Are we this or are we that? US has Moon in Aquarius. We have are we this or are we that right along with you. You may be a little more flexible in Gemini than our Moon in Aquarius actually is. I used two separate charts here for Washington, D.C., to just show you that for us, we have a late Aries rising for our country, even though we have all those Aries planets in our 12th house as well. So similar themes. And let me just take and show you the USA chart that I use. I use a different chart than the Sagittarius Sibley rising. There are a lot of evolutionary astrologers who use the Gemini rising chart from Jeffrey's work. I started looking at Michael Munkasi's research. By the way, here's another highlight for you that you'll have an article you can refer to afterwards with the PDFs. And, you know, basically he did a lot of research over different dates and then played them against events, of course, that happened in our country. And so we were pretty consistent with our Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, that we would go from 9 to 4. They were like punching the clock, and there was no lunch that they would break for. And this is, you know, pretty proven in our records. But in 1989, Library of Congress released newly discovered old letters by especially Ben Franklin. And he was quoted as saying that our Declaration of Independence was signed between 9 and 11 a.m. So I used July 4th, 9:37. Now, whatever chart you use for July 4th, the thing that is so stand out with the USA chart is that we have three major aspects that always show inclusive versus exclusive trends. Give me your charge, you're hungry, you're poor, build a wall. And we go back and forth throughout our history. You are probably aware that back in 22, we had our first Pluto return. Yours is coming. You're 3/4 of the way, your last quarter, crises in consciousness again. Well, we're having the death and rebirth going on right now, and you probably catch our news more than you want to. But Pluto in Aquarius is going to go over the south node of our moon here in a couple of years. And as I said, even Aquarius, the duality of air, include, exclude, we're going to have a public soul identity crisis. Can you believe it's going to be a presidential election after the one in 24? Oh boy, stay tuned. We'll see what happens with all that. But I just wanted to introduce you to this chart in case you've never heard of it. And if you're curious, you can take a little look on your own if you would want to. Now, I want to briefly bring up another chart that doesn't, the closest aspect that's coming with these ingresses is going to be Pluto in Aquarius opposing the moon in the chart of Israel. Who of us hasn't been consumed again with another war started? Whether it's an official or unofficial declaration, who we all know somebody's bombing somebody and somebody's bombing somebody back. If you just look at the bi-wheel of the Hamas attack, you can see that it is current to today. And when I was reviewing this chart to look at these ingresses, the thing that stuck out for me, I use transits, major progressions, and solar arcs. I work with all three forecasting methods. Solar arc Pluto has moved from 12 Leo all the way to the Israeli ascendant, and it went over at July 23rd. Now, solar arcs are a degree for a year, 360 years around the circle of the chart. We are in the midst of the Pluto death and rebirth in the identity of this country. We saw with Netanyahu wanting to put a demise, take away power from the judicial Supreme Court in that country, and all of the uprising and protests that created. That's still there. But there's just so much going on in this chart right now. We don't have the time to look at it. Perhaps one of the biggest ones is Uranus and Taurus, just creating all the trauma of the bombs and the explosions and the literal disruption of a small area of land that holds 2 million people, Palestinians, that are already desperate for resources and having enough food, clothing, and shelter. So I think we will see within the next couple of years, by the time Pluto opposes their moon, that the public will rise up, and all across the world, it's going to be your progressive versus conservative forces and groups back and forth over the identities of their countries. Another way of saying it was, we have democratic forces and autocratic forces, back and forth, broadly inclusive, exclusive, back and forth, that we shall see all the way throughout Pluto and Aquarius. My guess is that by the time we get to the end of the next 2 decades with this transit, we're going to start to realize that the planet's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and we have to figure out how to get along together. Again, I could spend hours on these, 3 charts. I just am giving you tidbit examples. I want to talk a few more minutes here on some collective things. But first of all, in that world of AI and artificial intelligence, here's what you need to know, okay? It can just go over your head and feel confusing. We are looking at conventional versus quantum computing. Conventional computing is a calculator. It's a binary storage, and it computes 1 or 0 with transistors and little switches that we make smaller, 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 smaller. And we've got them about as small as we can get, one of these things. And so what we've been doing, and not just now, I think, it's been going on for 40, 50 years. I think it took off in the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn in 1993, which is when we really saw computers start to take off and expand. Quantum was coming along all the way through that as well. So quantum computing works with subatomic particles, and it can store multiple values, 1, 0, both, or anything in between at the same time. And quantum mechanics, okay, allows the computers to work parallel at the same time versus serial. And so the example of that in quantum physics is light can be the particle and wave at the same time, if you follow any quantum physics in the metaphysical world. And so this is the beginnings of artificial intelligence. And now we're taking it further and further and further, and it is going to explode with not only Pluto in Aquarius, but Uranus and Gemini as well. Now, here's a book. I told you I'm going to have some books that you can all go research if you want to. This was published a while back. Remember Dan Brown and the Da Vinci Code? Is it 15 years ago by now? Fictional books, but always on deep subjects. He tackled the subject of AI in this book, Origin. It is a great book to read because it goes through the myth of religion and is there a divine intelligence? And so the whole thing about AI, and as we move into the Aquarian age, and Pluto's a big initiator of that, no one has the date, we move into the Aquarian age, 200-300 year transition, but it brings up the science versus morality debate. And so religion tends to have a Saturnian reaction, okay? Women cannot be priests in Catholicism, okay? And spirituality is always learning to adapt with evolving science. And so all of this science versus morality debate is going to come up big time through Pluto's transit in Aquarius. Now, AI is bringing about what we call the metaverse, which is putting on them little glasses, but it's experiencing alternative realities. But it removes us from the physical world. This metaverse is just going to explode. We'll use it in creating safe ways of having self-driving vehicles in the future. And so it can be something that's positive for us, but it's also something that can be very scary as well. And so it's a very powerful algorithm of that quantum computing that thrives on data. And so there's this phrase I love: data is to AI what gasoline is to cars. And that comes from this book, AI Superpower. And by the way, I think this author is a Canadian. All right. Don't quote me on that, but I think he was Canadian, and he ended up going over to China. He's the one who said this. And so a great book if you want to start researching into AI, and I will nutshell what's really important about it. The USA leads in AI research, but China is leading in the implementation of it. China has an app on their smartphones called WeChat, and it combines the functionality of all these apps you see on your screen. Facebook and PayPal and Uber and Amazon and WebMD. China just said, we're going to create one app, and it's going to do everything rather than all these different apps. And so will we move to that with Pluto in Aquarius? Or will we decide with antitrust laws that we've got to separate? We have to have a European Facebook, a US Facebook, a Canadian Facebook. They can relate, but you don't get to share the data back and forth. Time will tell. We're just going to see. We are hearing that AI is going to replace jobs, okay? It will enhance and work with non-routine jobs, okay? We have Da Vinci robots that go in and do surgeries for doctors, but we also have different things that doctors do that a robot cannot do. So there are certain jobs that AI cannot replace. It can't replace the CEO, at least not in the near future, but it will replace all routine jobs. It will learn how to pick the fruit. It will learn how to do the customer service. It will make your Starbucks coffee for you. And so this will create massive, massive disruptions in the work world. And while Aquarius is about social justice and equality, it can create extremes of social inequality. This is one of the distortions of the Leo Aquarius polarity. The elite social classes of haves and the rest of us the have-nots. The elites that hoard and do not share. And so this can be a source of massive uprisings to redistribute resources, governmental institutions. The power grabs, or excuse me, the degree of rebellion is going to depend upon the Pluto and Capricorn power grabs, again, that don't want to let go of yesterday. But throughout history, there's always been resets. If you haven't heard of the term debt jubilees from the Bible, pharaohs used to forgive slave debt to keep the peace. Oh, there's another great book that I am going to make a post-it note of that I want to write down, just make you aware of. I'll put that up after the break. And so again, while we have this intent to create social equality, it's going to be up to the masses to see whether or not we create it. And do we create it peacefully, or do we create it in some not so peaceful ways? Now, I want to touch in on the whole world of resources, because Pluto is shared resources. Pluto Scorpio 8th, shared resources, shared wealth. Cryptocurrency kind of fell out of favor right now. I've been kind of working with this one for a while. You know, the pros is that it can eliminate the middleman and lower the fees. It allows for autonomy with money. But guess what? China's WeChat that we just talked about, it has zero exchange fees between merchants and the public, or merchant to merchant, or however they want to do it. And our westernized banks and credit card companies, they do not want us to know this, because they make a lot of money off of charging us fees to do a digital transfer that takes no work. Cons of cryptocurrency: it's very volatile as an investment, and it takes extreme amounts of electricity. I don't know where you are in Canada, but in our western neighbor next door, Wyoming, they're trying to get into the crypto world to replace the diminishing coal jobs, but they're having to do all of this electrical line investment just to mine for Bitcoins. Another con, it can be controlled and turned on off by someone in power. Government, banks, financial elites, and of course we have the whole Ponzi schemes from that, his name was Friedman, who went down and took a bunch of Hollywood money with him, doing that in the crypto thing. Regardless, it's not going away, and it can be one of the next battlefields between democratic and autocratic countries as we move through Pluto and Aquarius. Now, Monetary policies can be disrupted with Pluto in any sign of the zodiac. In Capricorn, we saw the increasing polarity of wealth between haves and have-nots. One thing that doesn't get brought up enough is what we call derivatives. And it's basically leveraging usually somebody else's money and borrowing it to gamble. And it's what created that 2008-09 crisis that took, recession worldwide. Our Federal Reserve is trying to do everything it can to not let this happen again. However, there's other things going on. China has been busy lending money to third world countries, and they are at risk of defaulting. And it's starting to, you're going to start hearing a little more about it, especially South American, African countries that, oh, we got all this money to create these roads, but now we can't feed our people because all of it is going to interest. China is charging interest to those third world countries. Well, some of your big organizations like the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, they don't want to give more loans to these third world countries because it's just going to go to China. So just an example of how we still have not had a reset, how we still have wealth redistributions that need to take place, and we are globally connected now. Just watch a little bit of this in the news if you want. More on this, I'll show you where to look for resources. But this is bringing up an issue that we will call UBI. How many of you have heard of Universal Basic Income? It is a tax and transfer program that can correct the inequalities that AI is going to exacerbate. In other words, Goldman Sachs, an investment company in New York, says that 1 out of 11 jobs, 300 million jobs, will be lost worldwide in the next decade. And there are others who say we could lose up to 40% of our jobs in the next couple of decades, Pluto Aquarius. And so we're going to start to hear more about universal basic income, because as we get more people on the planet and there are less jobs, something has to give. And so I've been an advocate of public banking for quite a while. And basically, profits generated from private banks go into CEOs and shareholder pockets. Profits generated from public bank credit are returned to the public. It can go to take care of our youth and elderly and create infrastructure for us. Let me give you 2 examples. One's yours and one is my neighbor, our twin. I'm from South Dakota, North Dakota. The only public bank in the United States that has existed since 1919. And it was just like the Alberta Bank I'm going to show you in a moment, to counteract all the railroad robber barons charging extreme prices to ship our goods and services from, our northern plains, call you southern plains for lack of better words. And so this is a shining example, and year after year after year, and through the oil boom and bust, they have continued to have profits. In 2008, 2009, in those years after, they had the lowest foreclosure rates, default rates, etc., etc. In the United States, North Dakota has more banks per capita than any other state in our union, 6 times as many banks. It is because BND acts like a mini Fed. The Bank of North Dakota does not lend directly to private entities. That's where it's different from Alberta's public bank. Here is one of the best books I can recommend. Banking on the People, Ellen Brown. Her website is webofdebt.com. However, you can find her, through this book, and she co-founded the publicbankinginstitute.org. When you go there, it's a lot about the different states across the US and the public banking movement that's moving on, but everything in there extrapolates to any other country in the world. And it's that Aquarian grassroots up movement of returning profits back to Main Street, not Wall Street. Now, here is your ATB Financial that was created back in 1938, a couple of decades after the Bank of North Dakota. What the difference was, again, in your early days, you really didn't have a separate board of directors that would safeguard things. You had some premiers in Alberta that made a lot of risky loans. And so you became very susceptible to the boom bust cycles with your minerals because of this. Now, this is not the case so much anymore. Now, ATB calls itself the largest public bank in North America. And so I am sharing this because you already have a province that has set the way, just like we have in the United States. And so as you look at this ingress chart, the first time Pluto went into Aquarius, look at all this Aryan energy right here on Saturn, which is the structure of this business. Look at how you're having a Uranus return, the first one for this business entity, I should probably call it. It's not a business, it's a public bank. But you get the point of what I'm saying here. You know, whatever financial upsets may come down the road, it just makes this public banking movement more and more conscious and aware. Now, the private banking movement is working very hard behind the scenes, trying to destroy the public banking movement, to put it in a very brief way. It's just like the cigarette companies having all the research about cigarettes creating cancer, and they hid it from the public. The private banking industry is trying to do the same thing. Now, here's where the beauty of the internet and AI and all that comes through, because we can now spread the structures of how to create public banks so easily. Won't go into details on it, but you can definitely learn it for yourself if you want to. I just wanted to share this with you. Here was the second book Ellen Brown wrote. This is about public banking across the world, if you're interested. This book's about 10 years old. I want you to know that you had a public banking system through your postal service for many, many years, until the private banking system crossed you over. And so a government that owns its own bank can keep the interest and invest locally, resulting in the potential savings of 35 to 40% when the book was written. Now the interest savings are half, about 50%. Banking becomes a public utility, sustaining the economy rather than mining it for public gain. And banks again become safe places to store our monies and our public revenue and our private savings. I've been on this soapbox all the way through Pluto and Capricorn. I don't think I'm going to get off of it, because I think the Pluto and Aquarius disruptions can be quite interesting. Okay, a moment on the polarity to Aquarius. And this will be especially when Pluto's retrograde. The Leo, it's that spark of life force, that fire spirit element that desires to create, to be, to exist. We all have a unique creative spark within us to contribute to the evolution of humanity. And so there is an intent to break free from the traumas of those past, and where we are resistant to change. And when Pluto's retrograde, to find that courage, even when it's not retrograde, the polarity is always there. To find that courage to act, to create, to be, So we want to find some way of living as Aquarian groups. But within that, we all have something to contribute. And what can happen because they are fixed modalities is that we can think about what we want to do and think about it and think about it. This is what Aquarius does. I'm going to think about it a little more. I'm air. Leo, which is fire, says do. You've got to change. You've got to find that spark within yourself to live, change, create. Now, Leo's drama, Aquarius is trauma. And so we may have some of those things. When it does, it helps us go inward to self-reflect and to self-love. And the biggest archetypes of Leo is learning to love ourselves rather than the drama of trying to get it outside of ourselves. Inner then reflects outward. And it allows us to recognize we are not the center of the universe. And it allows us to broaden our ability to recognize that we need fairness, equality, and co-creation on the planet. And so when we learn to self-love, it creates an emotional maturation for us that then allows for self-responsibility. Leo following Cancer, and I would almost say Aquarius following Capricorn. And so we have to be careful here of projecting any emotional immaturity and insecurities forward. Okay, this can be one of the things in Aquarius that can happen. With the Leo polarity, we can act out where we are emotionally arrested or where we have not healed the wounds of our childhood, and where Leo becomes that bottomless pit, need. I'm going to do the drama of a love affair. I'm going to be the narcissist or the starving artist syndrome. You know, again, we can go to all those emotional distortions to get attention rather than do that Aquarian objectivity, looking at it from the broader perspective. So do your best, especially during Pluto retrograde, pointing to Leo. Where do I need to emotionally mature? Now, we as individuals will gravitate towards other like-minded souls for the courage to support our creative ideas. In other words, we're going to start to have this spark of inspiration of what to do in regards to climate change. That's Neptune's subject. We're going to look at how, innovation comes through, and then we're going to find those groups of people that go, oh, I get it, and we'll learn to work together. In the US, think Silicon Valley with technology. You will have your own areas of that, in your country. We're not guaranteed to evolve. Again, fixed modalities with Aquarius and Leo. And so we've got to make efforts here. And Leo's the energy to do it. And so is our youth, because they're going to challenge society and authority structures. And so the Leo polarity is the intent to recognize that larger picture, and then what's our unique role that we get to fulfill? And how can we honor that in other people? So we all get to have our spark of creativity, our spark of genius, and we can learn how to do it together. And so whenever Pluto turns retrograde and direct, again, the outer moving planet, the slower moving outer planets, they have a tendency, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are called unconscious planets in general. When they turn stationary, retrograde, and direct, those are the time periods where everything comes to the surface and we can have those aha moments of awareness to make the changes that we want to make. You know, Leo is free will. Leo is courage. Leo is that ability to really make those changes that we want to see in the universe. So, can you see the spark of universal source in everyone, including yourself, and everywhere? All right, and so these are my slides other than the ending slides. I'm going to look at my time. Looks like we've got about 15 minutes that we can do any Q&A, areas that I haven't looked at. As we move forward, we're going to then start including the aspects of Uranus and Neptune to Pluto. Again, I'm showing these on the screen in a generic way, looking at Pluto as the starting point, no matter where it is on the circle. Pluto would be the starting point. You go in a counterclockwise movement, and Neptune is getting to 60 degrees from Pluto. And if you keep going, Uranus is getting to 120 degrees from Pluto. And we also, if you use Neptune as a starting point, Uranus is getting 60 degrees from Neptune. And then if we switch these to Chiron, Pluto's starting point, we're going to have waxing squares with Chiron, waxing sextiles with Neptune. And so, questions, comments for a couple of minutes from anybody? No worries if there's not.
Kim, it doesn't seem like there's any questions on our part so far. People are still processing their saying.
I understand. I understand. I
Oh,
did
and they're
show.
saying that you are so clear. That, yeah, that was the comment. So
Okay.
it's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, it's not in the recording, but for those of you who were here before the recording, I put my chart up on the screen so you could see my filter and 5 planets in the 9th house. What would I do but teach? And I love teaching astrology. So just a few ending slides for you. This one is a very inspiring slide for me. Violence is the method by which the ruthless few can subdue the passive many. Nonviolence is a means by which the active many can overcome the ruthless few. I've used this slide for about 10 years, and in the month of October, it has become extremely important again. Exhausted, overwhelmed. I'm a Scorpio, sun in Scorpio. I have as much Scorpio as I do Sag, 9th house. And so I go deep. Knowledge is forewarned and forearmed. It is up to each of us to be in the world what we wish to see in the world. Here's a mantra that I created about 30 years ago, at least. Spirit of God, Goddess, come through me. Mind of God, Goddess, speak through me. Heart of God, Goddess, love through me. Body of God, Goddess, I am. And you can take it and replace the word me with you and us. All right, I do have one housekeeping slide. These are all hyperlinks to areas on our website, evolutionaryastrology.net. And I do an annual forecast, a public webinar. I have my date for next year. If you are interested in that, and if you enroll in our email newsletter on our website, you get notices of everything. And then something that I did specifically for you Canadians, just in case there's new astrologers that do not have access to computer software really easy. here are all the Pluto and Aquarius aspects to your Canadian chart at 12 midnight on was it July 1st, or I think it was. I know your sun in Cancers like us, but I go into the minor aspects, okay? So the semi-squares with Chiron, etc. And so I thought I would just include these for you at the end of everything so you can see your own dates in a nutshell. And there are 2 of these. So there are just those 2. All right, everyone, that is the last slide. So I am going to stop the recording as I figure out how to do that. There it is. There it is.